In this session, we will see what is general architecture. General architecture is nothing but the flow in which the query gets executed from starting to the ending of the completion of the execution of the query. So, uh, how the query, when we execute a query in the Postgres and how the user gets connected to the database, we'll discuss in this session. So, when we have the product called PostgreSQL database software, so he is going to use this software product. So the users who use this product we call as end users. So who all are the end users for this product? So there are different types of end users who build or test this product. For them we call as uh, product users. Who use this product is called product users. Also, there are some other type of users who are developers who is going to test this or develop this product we call as development users or developers. And also the users who is going to administer this Postgres database we call as database administrators. So PostgreSQL database administrators. And again the final is application team, the team, the applications which use this data, the people who are working on application testing we call them as application application team users. So the first category is product users, we call them as product users. The next is developers. Next is database administrators, DBA we call them as database administrator. The users who will manage this database we call them as database administrators. The next is application team. These are the users who will be working from the application team. So all these users we call these users as end users for the PostgreSQL database software. These all are the users who are going to work on the use this PostgreSQL software. So whenever a user want to connect to the database, they need a medium called interface. That we call that as client interface. So there is a between the end users and the database software, we have some other called client interface, medium called client interface. This we call as client interface. Yeah. What are the different types of client interface we have? Some uh, command line interface, GUI tools. First one is command line interface. So we call as uh, CLI. And again we have GUI tools, GUI tools. And again another one is app servers. Yeah. First one is CLI, command line interface tool, CLI, command line interface. The next is GUI tools. In our previous session, we discussed there are some uh, uh, graphical tools called PEM, PostgreSQL Enterprise Manager, Enterprise Failure Manager, and there is another tool called EDB BAT. These are all the graphical tools you call. And also we have some other tools called PGSBin. IV, and DB Ever, DB Solo. Oh, these are all the graphical to different types of graphical tools we have in the market. Then again, coming to the uh, applications of app servers. So we have other client interface called app servers. So here we'll see what are the uh, CLI tools we use. CLI tools is nothing but we connect using PSQL. This is the client interface tool. Then again coming to the GUI tools, we have PG admin, DB Ever, DB Solo, etc. We have DB2 GUI tools. Next, coming to the app servers, we have JBoss, Tomcat, WebLogic, etc. So these are the few of the tools, GUI tools, app servers, and client interface, command line interface. So we know who are the end users for this PostgreSQL database software, and what are the client interface through which the end users will be accessing the PostgreSQL database. So now we'll go to the database server where the database will be installed. So this is the database server. So this one is the DB server. DB server. So the default port number where the PostgreSQL software is installed is PostgreSQL is default. So we call this as DB server. So let's write it here. So what is the default port for PostgreSQL software? Is 5432, and we can go up to 65,000 port number. We can choose any port number up to 65,000, but the default one is 5432. So what all the what does DB server contains? The DB server contains postmaster process. This is nothing but a worker process. In Oracle, we call this process. This is similar to the process called PMON process, which is in Oracle. So here we call the workers as process. So here we have postmaster. So let me draw this into postmaster. Then again we have compute resources like memory, IO, etc. Then we have another layer called storage layer. So what all will go in detail. So what will be there in the here? The first one is postmaster process. So here what we have? Here we have resources such as memory, IO, etc. Come CPU, all like etc. Those are all the IO resources. We'll go in detail. So here we have storage layer. So here we have storage layer. So here this is storage layer. In the storage layer, we have a directory called data directory. In here only we have data directory. So we learn about this, what all these are. So these are all, this is the way how the customer connects to the, or the end users connect to the database, how they can. So uh, there are some end users, there are few end users who are going to the users who use this product, we call them as end users. So who are the end users? The product users, developers, database administrators, application team will be using this PostgreSQL software, database software. So how they are going to the connect to the database? They are going to connect using a client interface. The client interface is nothing but it is a medium through which the end users will be connecting to the database. So the client interface tools are command line interface, graphic GUI tools, app servers. Different tools are mentioned here. So this is how they are going to connect. And the default port number for PostgreSQL database server is 5432, and we can go up to 65,000. So what does the database server contains? It contains postmaster process and the compute resources such as memory, IO, CPU, etc. And again, a storage layer where the data is stored. And in the storage layer, we have a directory called data directory. So here, uh, the postmaster process is nothing but it is similar to the uh, Pmon process in the Oracle database. So, yeah. Now, whenever a user comes, whenever a request comes from the end user to the database, let's see how it is processed. So whenever a user executes a query, or any user, the end user, any of these end users send a request to the database, what happens means the first thing is the user request comes to data. Whenever the user request comes to the database, the postmaster process will perform host-based authentication. So what is host-based authentication? Host-based authentication. Host-based authentication is nothing but whenever a user connects to database, it has to validate the user ID and password to make sure that that user is authorized to access this database. So each and every user, they will be having some client IP address and which DB they want to access, and all the details. So why we do this authentication process? Because we have to allow the connections which are trusted, what we call is we should allow only the trusted connection to the database server. Uh, so there is a file in the database server called pg underscore hpa dot conf. So what is the file name? The file name is there is a file called pga underscore hba dot conf. So this is a file which contains. So whenever we in PostgreSQL database, so the users will be connected only whenever their IP address are whitelisted in this file. Then only the postmaster will, whenever the IP address of the end user is whitelisted in this file, then only the postmaster process will be, the postmaster will consider that connection as trusted connection. So, where is this file located? This file is located under the data directory. File is located under data directory. This file is located under data directory. So, what does this file contain? This file will contain the this file contains the client IP address which DB they want to access. So, the client address. This file contains the whitelisted IPs. So it contains the whitelisted IPs. Whenever whenever request comes or that the client IP comes to the database server, the postmaster process will check the HBA PG and HBA.conf file. If the IP is whitelisted in this file, then only this postmaster process will consider that connection as trusted connection. This is the first step. So once then if that is trusted connection, then the session is established or connection is established. So once the connection is successful, postmaster process will create a Postgres process ID for that request which is came from end user, and that Postgres process is responsible for doing the work. Uh, doing the work. So what happens? The first step is when a request is when a user request comes, the postmaster process performs host based authentication. So once this host based authentication is once the authentication is successful, postmaster process will create a Postgres process, and it will assign this process to the user process. This process is responsible to do the work whichever the user is requesting. Now, Postgres process will perform some plastic or generic steps. Postgres process will perform few plastic or generic steps. It will perform few generic or plastic steps. So, what are those steps? The first one is syntaxer. Next is syntax security check. The next one is resolver. Next one is optimizer. Next one is dispatcher. So these are all the checks the Postgres process will perform. So what is each steps we'll discuss. So the syntaxer in the syntaxer stage, it will check whether the user running query is using the correct syntax or not. This is what in this stage in the syntaxer stage it will check whether the user is running the query with proper syntax or not. It will check in the syntaxer phase. And in syntax security, next phase called security check. In this phase, it will check whether the user who is running this query is having sufficient privileges or permissions to run this query or not, or to access that. Suppose if the user is accessing a table, whether that user is having necessary permissions on that table or not. It will check all these privilege or permission related checks it will do. So once this phase is successful, then it will come to resolver. So in the resolver phase, it will check. So suppose that if the query is getting executed for the second time, the results of the query will already will be present in the memory cache memory. So if all the results sets in this resolver phase, it will check whether this execute query is executing for the first time, or it is coming for the second time or third time. So if it is already executed previously, then it will fetch the result set from the cache memory, and it will give it to the end user, or else it will or it whether if it exists, then it will give it from the uh, give it to the end user. End user. If not, it will perform next steps. uh, Postgres by default, it will the size of the uh, query result set is 100 MB, 100 MB in cache. If that size is suppose if you are if you, when a query is executed, the cache memory in the cache memory size is by default 100 MB. So whatever the memory it can accommodate, it will accommodate all the results set into the that 100 MB 100 MB cache size. If the 100 MB size is going to be filled up, or the result set which are going to be more than 100 MB, then what it will does is it will clean up the cache memory using FIFO algorithm. So that is first in first out algorithm. The old results will be deleted using this first in first out algorithm, and it will do that. It will maintain the memory in the that cache. And next, coming to the optimizer. Optimizer is nothing but it will generate the best and least cost execution based on the statistics. So what does the optimizer do? Optimizer will generate a plan which will provide best performance. So whenever you do some gather statistics, it will depending on the statistics of that table or any object, it will generate the best plan to give better performance of that query execution. Then coming to the dispatcher process. So what does dispatcher process? Once all these checks are done, syntax check, security check, and resolver, optimizer, plan generation. These all are completed. Then dispatcher will follow the plan, and the plan generated by optimizer, and it will do the operation. Next respective. It will go to the data disk, and it will fetch the requested data or other any other perform operations whichever is requested by the user process. Yeah. So all our data will be available in the data directory. So whatever the data in data we have in the database, that will be available in the data directory. And before execution of this query, the Postgres process requires some resources which are like memory, IO, temp table, temp space, and all the resources which will be config. In our uh, uh, Oracle terminology, we have a called parameter file where we specify resources limits, how much shared memory we need, how much CPUs we need. This all we will be mentioning in the file called parameter file as init parameter file p file or server parameter file. In the same way, in Postgres we have a file called PostgreSQL.conf, which is the file PostgreSQL PostgreSQL.conf. So PostgreSQL.conf. This is a configuration file which will contain this file contains 360 parameters with default values. With the default value, it will contain values. So what all these values will be there? So these are all related to like memory, input, IO resources, temp spaces, all other resources which are required to manage this database system. So on a high level, the end users are going to be connecting to the database through a client interface. The client interface will be command line tool, graphical tools, application server. So once the whenever the user sends a request to the database server, a request will be create a user request will be created, and the postmaster process on the database server will perform the post-based authentication. So once the authentication is successful, then the postmaster process will create a Postgres process. Then that postmaster will assign this Postgres process to the user process, and once the postmaster process assigns this Postgres process to the user process, the Postgres process will be responsible for doing the work for whatever the user process is requesting. So once the worker assignment is done, the post whatever the query, whenever the user process executes a query, this Postgres process will perform some steps which are syntaxer, which is syntax checking, security checking, resolver, optimizer, and dispatcher. So these are all the steps the Postgres process will be performing, and it will give the output to the uh, output to the end user. So in PostgreSQL, we have two files which are similar to the our Oracle database. So first one is pg underscore hba.conf. This is a host-based authentication configuration file. So this is similar to our tnsms.org file in our Oracle database. So what does this happen? This pga dot underscore hba.conf file will be having all the whitelisted IP address of the client and other all details. So this file we use for host-based authentication. And again, we have another file called PostgreSQL.conf configuration file. So this is similar to our parameter file or server parameter file in our Oracle database system. So what does this contain? This will contain this PostgreSQL.conf file will have 360 parameters defined in that parameter file with default values. So that file will be coming with 360 parameters, so with the default values. So if you want to increase any values, memory or any other values, you can increase it, or you can use that with the default values. So this is the general architecture of the PostgreSQL database software. So this is for this session. Thank you.